Once upon a time, and admittedly before I joined the modding scene, the main goal of Game Boy modders was to make the Game Boy line screens bright and lit, because that was something they just absolutely, completely were not. And so it started out with front lights, eventually we got into backlights. By the time that I joined the modding scene, what was most impressive that was happening was better recreating the overlays and textures of old Game Boy handhelds, as well as the addition of on-screen controls that you could access with button controls, and then progressing along with our current technology. For example, the OLED screen for the Game Boy Color by High Speedito, which is not my cup of tea, but a ton of people love it, and I think technically it's very cool. But what's been most interesting to me is screens that capture the vibe of the original consoles while being bright. If you've watched my videos before, you know that my favorite Game Boy Advance screen is the ITA screen. Unpopular opinion, comparatively, the ITA screen is by Funny Playing, and it is the touchscreen from the DSi repurposed for the Game Boy Advance. Of course, these are all repurposed screens, but there's something very natural and kind of kitschy about it being a DSi screen. And having grown up with the Nintendo DS, it has that familiarity and that nostalgia that the Game Boy Advance also has. So those natural scan lines, even some of the yellow fringing, it just feels like I'm playing a retro console. So when Cloud Gaming Store came out with the half transmission screen for the Game Boy Color, not the most natural sounding title, I was pretty intrigued, and a lot of people were very excited, as it is meant to mimic the original Game Boy Color screen. I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and today we are going to install and talk about the half transmission screen from Cloud Gaming Store for the Game Boy Color. So what makes it different? Well, it has an off function where the light is just off and it's just a display that is about Q5 size, pretty big compared to the original Game Boy Color screen, and it looks very much like someone took the original Game Boy Color screen and it was kind of, day one, and restored it, no issues, no aging, and bigger. And bigger is better when it comes to these screens, so I'm told. And it also does still have backlight options. Now, the backlight options they have like this shimmery quality to them that you don't find in IPS screens and OLED screens, and we'll obviously take a look at that. That's the best way I can describe it without showing it to you. It doesn't get as bright as IPS screens. Of course, there is the option to remove a resistor off the driver board, and that helps it get even brighter. I didn't do that, so I'm not sure exactly how much brighter it gets, but it has that option. So yeah, it's supposed to give this sort of nostalgic feel of the original Game Boy, playing it in the sunlight, playing under your bedroom light, playing with a flashlight under the covers, but modernized in the sense that it is larger and it is crisper, and there is the option to turn the light on. So I was pretty excited about it. I didn't grow up with a Game Boy Color, which might skew this review. Obviously, all these reviews are subjective. But yeah, I grew up, the earliest console I had was a Game Boy Advance, and then I had the SP and then the Nintendo DS. So I didn't necessarily have nostalgia for the Game Boy Color. I definitely wanted a Game Boy Color. I just never acquired one. But I can appreciate nostalgia, right? So I have been wanting for a while now to have a dedicated Game Boy Color. I have 2 Game Boy Pocket Colors. I have the Frog Boy Color. These are all things that I've built, and I have a couple of Pokemon Center Game Boy Colors, which are not ones that I would want to mod heavily. I did put the 2-inch Cloud Game Store screens in them, so they are backlit, but compared to, say, the Q5 screen, which is absolutely gorgeous, you don't really feel drawn to play to those. I low-key kind of want to change those back to their original screens. But I've been missing an actual Game Boy Color, which, I don't know, there's something sweet about the form factor and the fact that it takes AA's, which, while the Game Boy Pocket Color is my favorite by far, it does take AA's, and AA's don't last as long as we'd like them to. And while I'm a huge proponent of just swapping out your AAA batteries and, you know, buying those rechargeable ones, I do the same with AA's. Sometimes you just want to trust your Game Boy Color. So I wanted to make a sleeper Game Boy Color build. I went with a dandelion yellow one because the dandelion yellow is one that it seems like it can't be perfectly replicated. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of colors that can't be, especially the limited edition ones, special edition ones, but there's something about the yellow one that is very wonderful, especially in the beige and gray world we currently live in. All I wanted to do, no changing of buttons, nothing like that, just swap out the screen for a modern screen and also eventually change the light out for Froggo Custom's battery indicator. That's not something we're going to do in this video because I didn't have one, but I was initially going to change it to a Q5 screen, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to change it out to a CGS half transmission screen and take a look at how we would do that. We're gonna look at cutting the shell, installing the screen, and looking at what it looks like. Now, I do recommend getting a pre-cut shell if you're not married to the idea of your original shell. If you do want to cut an original shell, you need an X-Acto knife, something to mark things with. Masking tape might help as well, especially if it's one of your first times. Files, small files to clean up edges, and plastic clippers are great. I have these cheap Gundam ones and they're green. They've got a little frog guy on them. And I also use wire clippers as well to do the less precise kind of brutish work. And for the screen install, you obviously need the Wii screwdrivers, you need the tri-wing and the Phillips for opening up your Game Boy, and you'll need a soldering iron, obviously solder flux or a flux pen. And it always helps to have your own wires because sometimes the wires that come with these screens are a little flimsy and annoying. Yeah, I actually can't remember if I used the actual wires that came with it or I used my own. It's been a second since I put it together, but for you it'll be a second until you get to see it. So let's go over to the workbench and install this new screen and see if it's worth the hype. Here is our subject. It came with this cute Pikachu wrist strap, and it's in fantastic condition. The only thing is it has screen burn, so in that way it's a perfect candidate, even for non-believers, for an IPS replacement. So let's open it up and get started. I like to put it down on a soft towel. First, we need to take the charm off. And if you already know how to do these steps, everything is time-stamped, so you can jump around. So we need to take the batteries out to access the screws and also so it can open up. We have a total of 6 screws. They are tri-wing, and sometimes they're a little sticky if it hasn't ever been opened. These guys are getting older. I've actively been noticing that there are more places where I kind of feel there's either more force necessary or more delicacy in Game Boys than there was some years ago, as they age further and further. Then we can gently remove the back. Nothing is attached to it, so you can just pop it off. Remove the IR cover. Pop open the screen ribbon cable, and then we have 3 Phillips screws in the back here. Now, with the ribbon cable that I popped out, I might not have used my hands if this was a display that I was interested in preserving, just so that I don't crush the cable. I might have used a wooden dowel or anything of that sort. Plastic spudger comes to mind. Also going to pop out the power button, and then we can just lift out the motherboard again it is not attached to anything. We can remove the membranes and the buttons, put those to the side. These are all very nice and clean. And then we can move on to removing the display and the lens. So usually, again, if I was planning on keeping this display, I would be gentler. I would apply some heat, and then wiggling it around like that should allow it to pop off. But since the screen is damaged, I didn't care too much and ended up using that little pick-shaped spudger to remove the adhesive. And similar with the lens, I don't care about preserving it, so I can just wiggle it and use my hands to peel it out. It's also plastic, so you don't have to worry about it breaking into a million pieces. Now I like to clean the power button. Those get really gross and grody, so I applied some flux. I'm going to apply some fresh solder, and I will use an X-Acto knife to try to pop it out. It's a delicate balance of going from one side to another, and obviously be careful you don't scratch the board or any of the other components. I think sort of following up on the age thing, moving forward, I would probably use liquid flux instead of the pen, because it seems like these things are, again with age, kind of sticking down more than they used to. So I tried to make it easier for myself by using some solder wick to remove the solder, and hopefully that way the fresh solder would help it come off better. But instead the entire thing kind of popped off. And we can see that that is one filthy switch. Same with the contacts on the little nub as well. So I use this fiberglass pen to rub off all the gross stuff, and then I clean it with isopropyl alcohol. Do be careful on these little leaf switches because they can pop out, and once they do, they don't really go back in. To reattach it, I'm going to put some flux down again and freshen up the solder joints. If you have a keen eye, you'll see that one of the pads lifted. That is okay because that particular pad doesn't actually do anything, so I'm in luck. But sort of on your end of things, to make things easier for yourself, I would suggest using more flux than I did if you encounter a challenging switch like this one. Once that's down, we can put the little lever in, and then we'll put the metal shield on top. The part of the metal shield that has teeth goes towards the inside of your PCB. And then I'm holding it down with this spudger, and I'm kind of going to go back and forth on this so that I can make sure that it is as closely set down as possible so that the action of the switch isn't too loose. Once you're done cleaning that up with isopropyl alcohol, then we're going to clean the headphone jack. again with the fiberglass pen. If it continues to give you problems, this one didn't give me problems, this is just preemptive, I like to use some deoxit, and that tends to help clean up anything inside that you can't reach with the pen. I figured while I'm here I would upgrade the speaker to a funny playing one that I had laying around, and to make things easier for myself I'm going to remove the wires that came with the funny playing one and just pop it onto the wires already on the Game Boy Color. Now we're going to jump into trimming the OEM shell. I realized if I did want to swap it out for a Q5 later, I should open it up a bit more, so I was using the Q5 screen in order to measure fit. But essentially this is going to be a lot of scoring and cutting and filing and rinse repeat. So for the basic scoring, I do the top and bottom because those need to go at the seam. The left and right side are what's more complicated and what tends to vary the most between different displays. Although some displays do want you to have a little ledge on the top as well. So really it's up to the screen you go with. And then on the back, we also want to remove the bottom lip. This one is fairly standard. I think almost all the ones that you need to trim for that are larger than the original screen need you to trim this part. And then I use these wire cutters to make like general cuts, and eventually I clean these up with a nicer set of plastic cutters and also files. If something's not coming off, just try scoring it a little more, that tends to help. But you can also kind of do a pretty janky job of this and you'll be fine. But I do like to have it look as clean and neat as possible. That's part of me being proud of the work I've done.
This bottom lip especially, we want it to be as flat and smooth as possible. And the more we can take off with our wire cutters or plastic snippers or whatever, the better, because the file can't always smooth out super bumpy areas. And in this area, the display driver tends to lag down a little bit on a lot of screens, and so if there is a bump or a lip, you get a lot of pressure on the display, and that can damage your display. One thing to be careful of while scoring is to not let your hand slip, because you don't want to accidentally score the body of your shell and have a permanent scratch. If you feel like you might be prone to doing that, you can always cover up your shell with like several layers of tape or something like that, so that if it does slip, it doesn't catch the plastic, but it catches something else. Don't forget to pull off the plastic from the old display. I totally forgot to do that. All right, and if this fit your screen, you could ostensibly just leave it at this if you're okay with that, but I want it to be nice and clean. So I have this mini set of files, and the flat file I use for the most part on most of this. And then there's a pyramid shaped file, which I will later use for the corners. And yeah, it's just a lot of filing and snipping and going back and forth. And now I'm gonna pull out my Gundam plastic snippers, and this is really helpful for making very micro cleanups, which are too big for the file, but too precise for the plastic snippers or wire snippers. The reason I don't use it for everything is because I don't want to reduce their lifespan, but ostensibly you could use them from the very beginning. You just would dull them very, very quickly. I guess let's clean up and see how the Q5 screen fits in this. You should probably wear a respirator or something when you do this. I didn't do it, but you probably should. All right, so I see that the Q5 screen, the driver is having some issues fitting in on the bottom corners. So I'll clean those up a bit, maybe just reduce the width of this frame. Here is my pyramid file, and this is helpful for corners. Just always when you're going in on these corners and stuff, be careful, because if you put too much pressure, you're going to have weird indents. So yeah, everything in moderation, as they say. Let's try the Q5 screen again. The bottom is perfect. It looks like there's a little bit at the top that's preventing us from getting a good fit. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut off the top lip. This does make it so that the IR sensor fits a little bit more loosely while you're putting it together, but once everything's screwed in and closed up, you are all good. for good measure, I'm going to cut tiny little triangles on the top left and right so that the corners definitely have somewhere to sit in loosely. But I'm still keeping the lip on the left and right for the screen to stick on. Third time is the charm. And yep, it pops right in perfectly well. And that's what it looks like. Now on to the star of the show, the Cloud Game Store half transmission, half reflective screen. So the first thing I want to do is this does use one wire that needs to be soldered to the power switch. So just so I can get it the right length, I'm going to install the driver board only. I'm gonna cut the wire that came with it to expose the tip, and then we're gonna put some fresh solder onto the power strip where it needs to go, some fresh solder on the wire, tinning that. And there we go. And in case you can't see it clearly, it goes on the where it says 3 on the power switch. And then here I am putting the driver board in backwards. Don't do that. But I just want to get the length right, and technically I did get the length right, but yeah, probably not the best idea to put it in backwards. Didn't know that I was doing that. After installing so many of these, my brain can only hold so much information. Removing some of the plastic sleeve, using my soldering iron. Again, not the best thing, but you know, it's fast. It does the job. It gives you that nice smell of plastic burning. And then we want to test the display, which here it is. Don't take the film off until you're done. And also, you know, don't stick it on to your Game Boy until you've tested it. Then we can sort of pseudo put everything together and put the back on so we can pop batteries in and then turn it on. Instead of putting the power switch in, that would be convenient. I'm going to use a screwdriver, and there we go. I don't see any dead pixels. I don't see any damage, delamination, nothing like that. So that means that the display is doing great. So now we can get into actually setting this and seating this. A strange thing is that it didn't come with any adhesive. So I am using cell phone tape to stick it down. And I really like this cell phone tape. It's very strong. I've used it on a lot of projects. It's nice and thin and yeah, holds it down real well. But I'm not really sure what they expect you to use. I wonder if their shells come with an adhesive. But yeah, this didn't come with an adhesive. And of course, we need to trim the adhesive right there so that it's not covering the little light hole. Then we can put the screen in and just do a nice little massage on the sides. Don't press too hard. You don't want to damage the screen. You've come so far. And then I'll put it down on a soft surface and I can use that to massage it a little further. And then we can put our buttons in and our membranes in. I'm going to put some Kapton tape over the cartridge pins so that we can prevent any shorts. And then I'll put some Kapton tape over the driver board as well. This is not strictly necessary. The one part that I do like to do at least is to put the tape to stick the driver board to the back of the screen. So that way that when you open the Game Boy back up ever for any reason, there's a lot less flip-flopping of pieces. And now we can screw the board in. And put some Kapton tape over the wire just to keep it in place so that it doesn't get pulled. One thing that I did forget to do before screwing it in is to place the touch sensor so that it's folded over, which we will do in a moment using some tools because my fingers are too big to fit in there, and I imagine most people's are. We're just gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna use some tweezers to stick some Kapton tape on top of it so that it doesn't somehow move again, so that we always know where the touch sensor is. I really wish it didn't use a touch sensor. One more test with the batteries in, because I don't know. I don't trust anything enough to just test once. We're gonna test the touch controls. We've got pixel grid, HD monochrome, HD color, scanline 2. Don't know, there's no scanline 1. That all works, so we can put the screws back in. I don't like to tighten any screw until all the screws are sort of partially in. That way we're avoiding putting too much pressure in one point. So I sort of put all the screws in, kind of like half, 3/4 of a way, and then I go around and tighten them afterwards. And we are all done. We have the Cloud Game Store half transmission, half reflective screen in an OEM Game Boy Color shell. It was a lot of work, but it's worth it, right?
All right, so installation-wise, it's no different than plenty of other screens. I don't love that it doesn't have button controls. Come on, today, in this day and age, we should have button controls for everything. But other than the lack of button controls, I don't think this is for me. I think it is for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people who love it. I know there's a lot of people who love it. I've been told by you guys and by others in the modding community that they love it. But for me, it is not it. And I want to tell you why, in case this helps you with your purchasing decision. So when it's off, when the light is off, it is still too dark for me. Now, I've talked about this in my Playdate video where I feel like we've gotten so used to everything being bright that our eyes just have trouble adjusting to things that aren't as bright. And I think that's definitely the case here. You know, when I did spend some time to play with it, I was like, okay, no, I can see what's going on. My eyes are relaxed. I personally do think we need to spend a bit more time away from bright light screens, you know, because I don't think it's great for our eyes. I do get used to it, but the thing is I miss the vibrant colors. And I know that that's stupid because that's part of the nostalgia. These games were not made to be played with a light. In fact, I've heard a lot of people explaining that's why the games are so saturated in their palettes, is so that they can appear normal on the dark screen. But also arguably we had the Game Boy player, so we were able to see these games. If we had a GameCube, I did not, and a Game Boy player, I did not, because why would I have it if I didn't have a GameCube? We would be able to see them on a bright screen of our CRT. So technically we would be able to see the bright colors. And then plenty of re-releases have happened since on various Nintendo platforms, because how else will they make money? And in all of those re-releases, we're seeing those colors. The colors haven't been dampened. So in a way, it's hard to view the desaturated, not backlit, not frontlit, well, frontlit, sure, but not backlit colors as normal. So I did miss the vibrancy. So it's like, okay, Marissa, well, there is a light. And yes, and the light is really cool. So this half transmission, half reflective screen has a light. And, you know, as we can see in this footage, like it's like it has a weird like shimmer to it. Like it doesn't feel like a front light necessarily, but it doesn't quite feel like a backlight. And I don't mind it, I like it, but here's what stops me is that it's so cool. It's very much tinted on the bluish, whitish light side, whereas I personally, my eyes are a big fan of warm light, a more yellowish light. Not super yellow, but like, you know, whenever you buy a little like book light or something, it usually has 3 options. It has like a very whitish blue light, a very yellowish light, and then a nice warm in the middle. And I like the nice warm in the middle. Unfortunately, this screen is not that. It is the white bluish light. So if you would want this screen to play it backlit and you're okay with the whitish bluish light, then I would say this is perfect. Unfortunately, I'm not, so I will be swapping it out with a Q5 screen and probably listing this on my Discord or Ko-fi or something for someone who would appreciate the screen more than me. But I was so bummed out because I really wanted to like the screen. It really sucks when you feel like something aligns with your tastes and then it doesn't, because you're so excited. And it's not a fault of the screen, but that's just how opinions work, baby. That's just how opinions work. So I've seen a lot of hype around this, so I guess maybe in a way it's good to be a dissenting voice on something that both you and I would expect me to love. And by dissenting, I just mean, you know, it's not my preferred flavor. And so hopefully this helps. If you've already tried it, let me know what your thoughts are. Are you guys who do play with the half transition, half reflective screen, are you guys mainly playing without the light, or are you playing mainly with the light? Do you in general prefer a bluish whitish light, a cooler light? What is your setup looking like, and how is this giving you joy? And if not, what screen are you using? Are you someone who has settled on something? Because for me, I actually think before this came out, I thought Q5 was endgame. Because I think Q5 is beautiful. The overlays and stuff are really great. It has button controls. I'm not really at want for anything. It's laminated, and I thought, oh, maybe this will be endgame, but it wasn't. So for me, it's going to be the Q5 screen. The OLED to me is too bright, or too saturated rather, so I'm not a big fan of that. I really also like the ability to adjust saturation on the Q5 displays, because you can just mess around with the levels. So I do tend to lower the saturation a bit, but obviously not quite to the extent that you would see on a Game Boy Color with no backlight. I also wanted to take a second to show you this cradle. You probably saw it in the thumbnail. I hope you saw it in the thumbnail, because that's the thumbnail I uploaded. So this was sent to me by Random Print Co. I've known Random Print Co. for a while. His name is Jesus. Legally, his name is not Mr. Random Print Co. And he 3D prints a lot of cool peripherals and accessories for the Game Boy line, such as these invisible stands as well. He has ones for various Game Boy line consoles, and as the title suggests, they are invisible. The cradle, you slip your Game Boy Color in, or Game Boy Pocket, or whichever version you get. And you've got these little guys, and you just put a strap on it and you can hang it around like a purse. And you can either use it to carry your Game Boy around and kind of show off while you do it. But something a lot of people have been using it for as well is the Game Boy Pocket camera. So with this, it kind of, if you're a Game Boy camera fanatic, or just a fan of toy cameras, that's a pretty nifty setup, because you can just put this around your shoulder, go out, and you just easy access. You can take photos of all the cool things you see, like pigeons. I tend to take a lot of photos of pigeons, not with the Game Boy camera. It also, you can stick it on a tripod too. Again, I'm not like a Game Boy camera person, but if you can do like, I don't know, like long exposures or something, or maybe like a moving subject, putting this on a tripod and using the Game Boy camera, super cool. Speaking of Game Boy camera, I saw on Blue Sky that the Game Boy camera, they are working on a like click camera with Game Boy camera internals. So I'll put their Blue Sky in the description as well, in case you want to check it out. Thank you so much for watching. The names of my Ko-fi subscribers are going down, as well as my YouTube members. If you join my Ko-fi or YouTube membership program to be a Nerd Few Advanced, you will get access to game reviews as I finish games. Sometimes they're kind of like monthly and there's a few in one. Sometimes I play one game for 5 million months and then that's the review. If you do subscribe on Ko-fi, that's going to be more robust because there I can also share write-ups and things about other stuff. But if you prefer to keep everything in one place, that is also understandable. What matters is that you're here and I really appreciate it. And I am also still fundraising for my cat Marcel. Marcel was in the ICU in the beginning of the year and now we are more than halfway through the year. That's insane. But yeah, he racked up quite a bill. No regrets because he is doing better than ever. And he is wonderful and sassy and beautiful and persnickety, but he does not have employment. Unfortunately, no one will hire him because he has no thumbs and he's got really poor bedside manner, which rules him out of like the service industry, retail, medical field. Really thought he could be an x-ray technician, but thank you to everyone who's already donated. If you aren't able to donate, but you are a cat lover, no cat lovers, it is a big boon if you can share the link with them. I also stream on Twitch sometimes. If you want to know when I'm streaming, I try to schedule it in advance on Twitch. So if you follow me there, you should be able to see it. I still don't really understand how Twitch works from a viewer perspective, but I also announce on my Discord and on Blue Sky. Thank you to Random Print Co. for sending me the cradle. I've been your cool uncle, Marissa, and do not forget that you are always welcome at Cool Uncle's house. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.